adventure, intrigue, lost cities, ancient mysteries, and more on this week's episode of East 10 Investigates. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the East 10 Outpost. I'm Cody, and I'm going to be your guide into this week's investigation into our curious past. And what are we talking about this week, you might be wondering? Well, we're going to be taking a dive into something that throughout time has been both as practical as it is fashionable. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about ancient handbags, of course. So these handbags of the gods have been recorded throughout time, starting as far back as some say 12,000 years ago at Göbekli Tepe. These are seen on Pillar 43, which ominously depicts a scene showing what many believe is a depiction of the end of the world. And whether that's a prediction for an oncoming deluge or one that our ancient people were well aware of and many probably lived through, we can never be certain. But what we do know for sure is on Pillar 43 is the depiction of multiple handbags. And they appear very simply, like this. And you'll see this same very simple depiction appear over and over and over again. And you might say, well, of course, handbags were a practical thing to keep things in, just like they are now. And you're absolutely right. Let's think, in our modern time, it's more common that women will carry handbags, and what do they keep in there? Well, the things that are most important to them. Cosmetic goods, their cell phone, personal information, monetary payments, and anything that is of value to them, they keep literally close at hand in their handbag. And if you were to just find this out in the middle of the woods, you would have a great deal of information about what that person knew, what they liked, all sorts of things about them. So the handbag is a very practical and obvious tool, and it was for the ancient people as well. So, of course, you might say that they would be depicted carrying handbags. But the thing is, it wasn't like these people were just squishing up berries and painting it on with their fingers on caves. No, we do see examples of that, like in ancient Maori cave art and on different pottery. We do see examples of painted handbags, but more often than not, and more commonly, what we see is the handbag literally carved and inscribed into stone. And sometimes we even see this where the stone has been chiseled away from the bag, which, if you don't know anything about stonework, is actually a great deal more work to bring the object out of the stone as opposed to carve it into the stone. But that's a lesson for another day. So these people went to great efforts to carve this into stone, and you've got to ask yourself why. Because they didn't just waste their time carving things into stone. They only carved into stone what they wanted to be immortalized forever. They depicted their gods and what their gods were doing. And in depiction after depiction, and starting with Göbekli Tepe, we see that this handbag is something always carried by the gods, or people that they perceived as near gods, deities of sorts. So what exactly was in the bags, and where else do we see them? Well, let's take a look. So most people are well aware of the famous Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe, but what a lot less people are aware of is how many places this actually appears throughout history. And like I said earlier, many historians and archaeologists think Göbekli Tepe dates between at least 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. And that's based off of neighboring sites like Karahan Tepe and many more that they're continuing to find by the day. So where else exactly do we see these? Well, we see them as far away from Turkey as Mesoamerica, back in the ancient Olmec kingdom. We see Quetzalcoatl holding none other than a handbag while riding the fanged deity. The first time we see this appear in Mesoamerica, as far as we're aware, and a motif that we will continue to see appear again and again throughout Mesoamerica. But again, that's an investigation for another day. Let's stay focused right on the handbags. So we see that the Olmecs were aware of deities carrying these handbags. Well, now if we travel clear to India, we see sculptures of Shiva with what? None other than a handbag, depicted curiously on the Tree of Life, which was another motif very important to the ancient Mesoamerican culture. We see it throughout almost all of the Middle East, in the ancient Assyrian Empire, the ancient Mesopotamians, and we see it again with the Egyptians. We see the motif repeated as far away as New Zealand in the Maori culture. Again and again, it is always a bearer of knowledge, a deity, a god, sent to either rebuild society after a deluge or to impart knowledge on the society, to settle it down and civilize it. But the context is almost always the same. It is a great rebirth, a rebuilding, a gift brought to man. And always in that handbag is the same underlying thing. You know, growing up, one of my great heroes and inspirations was, of course, the famous fake character Indiana Jones. He inspired countless generations of archaeologists, historians, and history buffs alike to think history was in fact cool, because it is. It's fascinating. It's something that still to this day, as much as we think we know, we actually know so little about. But what was neat about Indiana Jones is time and again, he would pursue what he thought was fortune and glory. He would go after the treasure and come up empty-handed, but by the end he would realize he found his fortune and glory. And what was it? It was knowledge. And that's what he would keep in his satchel. And that's what, time and again, we see depicted throughout history and throughout pop culture as being kept in the satchel, is knowledge, is gifts of important civility, restarting of society, the spreading of information to everybody. And I think that is truly what fortune and glory is all about. So, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you have been inspired or found something curious about these handbags and want to dig in more. I encourage you to check out Graham Hancock and any of his books or talks, because he was one of the founding godfathers of this great handbag mystery and somebody who really pushed the envelope in working to connect all these together. If you want to go further into the speculation, something that he has brought up that I think is incredibly on point and probably very accurate is the fact that these handbags, these bringer of the handbags, were more likely than not related peoples. People who came from a proto-society, a society before the Great Deluge, whatever it was, or whatever multiple things it may have been, whether it was meteors, tidal waves, cosmic shifts, who knows, all of the above maybe. But something affected humanity so great that we restarted, and again, these people are depicted as helping in that great restart. So I believe, as Graham Hancock has suggested, that these people were indeed connected. And if you want to take it one step further, they may very well be connected to modern-day groups like the Freemasons. We see even on the American dollar, the Temple of Egypt is depicted. And in ancient Egyptian cartography, we do see, of course, the handbag motif. So you have to wonder if these great builders haven't always been and always will be living in the shadows, helping when mankind needs a little bit of a push back towards a technological start. So perhaps these have been a related society. Perhaps they're not. It's just people picking up where other Masons had left off, because unarguably, these people, these carriers of the handbags and the knowledge that they imparted were more commonly than not great building knowledge, great celestial knowledge, and great knowledge of how to run a civilized society. We see in our own American culture, the Masons exemplified that in their early works of literature, in their early buildings, and in the way our founding fathers designed our nation's capital. So I do wonder if perhaps these people were copying early societies, or they've been related and connected all along. Makes you wonder. Who knows? I certainly don't, but it's fascinating to speculate, and that's what we're all here for. So hopefully you enjoyed this journey through fact and speculation, and maybe you've come up with some conclusions of your own. But either way, join us next time here in the East 10 Outpost for another fascinating investigation into our wonderful and very mysterious past.